The saltwater spray carried the scent of gunpowder and rebellion across the Naval Special Warfare training facility as Lieutenant Commander Maya Reynolds felt Admiral Blackwood's weathered hands close around her McMillan TAC-50 sniper rifle. The .50 caliber weapon, her rifle, the one she'd carried through 4 deployments and countless covert operations, suddenly felt defiled by another's touch. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me show you how a real sailor handles this weapon, sweetheart. Blackwood's voice dripped with the kind of condescension that had followed Maya through 12 years of naval service. His breath reeked of expensive bourbon despite the early hour, and his dress whites strained against a belly that hadn't seen combat operations in decades. Maya's jaw tightened as she watched him fumble with the weapon's adjustment knobs, his thick fingers betraying an unfamiliarity that made her skin crawl. Around them, a crowd of Navy SEALs and support personnel had gathered, some drawn by curiosity, others by the electric tension crackling between the highest-ranking officer on base and the woman who'd earned more commendations than most of them would see in their entire careers. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Osprey Rodriguez, Maya's spotter and closest ally, shifted uncomfortably beside her. His weathered face was flushed with anger, but naval protocol kept his mouth shut. Lieutenant Jessica Rivera, the range safety officer, stood frozen between duty and disgust, her dark eyes reflecting the internal battle every woman in uniform knew too well. The TAC-50 had been Maya's constant companion since her first deployment to the Horn of Africa. She'd acquired it after her previous rifle was damaged during an extraction gone wrong that had killed her original spotter, Lieutenant Marcus Chen. The weapon bore marks of history: a scratch along the barrel from a desperate firefight in Yemen, wear patterns on the stock from a week-long stakeout in monsoon conditions, and a small blue dot she'd painted herself after her 100th confirmed target neutralization. Each mark told a story of survival, of precision, of the weight of decisions made through crosshairs. Blackwood hefted the 26-pound rifle awkwardly, his form betraying years of administrative duty. "You women always overthink the mechanics," he continued, his voice carrying across the range where other operators pretended to focus on their own weapons. "It's about strength, about having the guts to pull the trigger when it counts." Maya's grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, words spoken in Spanish during their last phone call before she passed. "Nieta, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Your worth isn't measured by their approval." But standing here, watching this man desecrate everything she'd built, Maya felt the familiar fire that had driven her from the working-class neighborhoods of San Diego to the elite ranks of Naval Special Warfare's few female snipers. The shooting competition had been Blackwood's idea, announced during the morning briefing with the kind of theatrical flourish he loved. "I hear we've got ourselves a real Annie Oakley," he'd said, his eyes fixed on Maya. "But this isn't the Wild West, and paper targets don't shoot back. Time to see what she's really made of." What Blackwood didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maya had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Not this specific confrontation, but the moment when she would have to choose between silence and standing up for something greater than herself. The choice between enduring and fighting back. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The targets downrange stood at varying distances. Standard bullseyes at 800 meters, steel plates at 1,200 meters, and the challenging long-range targets at 1,800 meters. But Blackwood had added his own twist. Human-shaped silhouettes scattered between the regulation targets, each one designed to test not just accuracy, but the psychological weight of aiming at something that resembled a person. 6 targets, "1 shot each," Blackwood announced, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "Winner takes all." He paused, his smile cruel. "Though I suppose we both know how this ends." Maya's hands remained steady at her sides, but her mind raced through calculations. Wind speed 8 to 10 knots from the southeast. Temperature rising toward 85 degrees. Humidity high, typical for Virginia Beach in summer. Her body knew these conditions like a pianist knows scales. Muscle memory built through thousands of rounds downrange. Osprey stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "LC, you don't have to do this. This is bullshit, and everyone knows it." But Maya was already moving, her decision crystallizing like frost on a winter morning. "Actually, Admiral," she said, her voice cutting through the sea air with surgical precision, "let me check the zero on that rifle first. Wouldn't want any mechanical issues to affect the demonstration." Blackwood's eyes narrowed, but protocol demanded he comply. As Maya reached for her weapon, his grip tightened, possessively. For a heartbeat, they stood connected by 26 pounds of precision-engineered steel and carbon fiber, the instrument that had defined Maya's career suspended between them like a bridge over an abyss. That's when Maya moved. Her left hand swept up in a perfect arc, striking Blackwood's extended arm at the precise pressure point where the radial nerve crossed the humerus. The technique learned not from naval training, but from her uncle Gabriel, a former martial arts instructor who taught her that sometimes the only way to deal with bullies was to hit back harder, applied exactly the right amount of force to disrupt Blackwood's grip without causing permanent damage. The crack that followed wasn't bone-breaking, but the Admiral's arm snapping back as his nervous system temporarily short-circuited. Blackwood's face went white, his mouth opening in a soundless gasp as the TAC-50 slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Maya caught her rifle before it hit the ground, the familiar weight settling into her arms like a missing piece of her soul returning home. The entire exchange had taken less than 2 seconds, but it felt like watching lightning strike in slow motion. The silence that followed was deafening. 300 naval personnel stood frozen in a moment that would be retold in barracks and mess halls for decades to come. Blackwood cradled his arm against his chest, his face cycling through shock, rage, and something that might have been respect. But Maya wasn't finished. With movements as fluid as water, she dropped to the prone position, her body aligning with the rifle like planets finding their orbit. The scope's crosshairs found the first target, a steel plate at 800 meters, as naturally as her lungs found their next breath. "Ma'am," Osprey whispered, dropping beside her in the spotter position. "Wind's picking up. Call it 9 knots, maybe 10. Maya's finger found the trigger, that familiar crescent of metal she'd caressed through midnight operations and daylight extractions, through moments when a single bullet meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope, the rhythm of her heartbeat, the whisper of wind across the coastline. The first shot rang out like thunder, and the steel plate at 800 meters sang as the .50 caliber round struck dead center. Before the echo faded, Maya was already acquiring her second target, her breathing steady and controlled. Target 2, bullseye at 1200 meters. The paper target disintegrated in a shower of fragments. Target 3, moving steel plate at 1000 meters, swaying in the coastal wind. Maya led it by half a mildot and squeezed. The plate spun wildly as the massive bullet transferred its energy. Each shot was a statement, a declaration written in gunpowder and precision. Maya wasn't just hitting targets. She was rewriting the narrative that had followed her since the day she first picked up a rifle. With every pull of the trigger, she was answering questions that had never been asked fairly, proving points that should never have needed proving. Blackwood had straightened, his arm hanging at an odd angle, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Around them, the crowd had swollen to include officers and enlisted personnel from across the base. Some watched with professional appreciation for marksmanship they'd rarely witnessed. Others seemed to grasp the larger significance of what was unfolding, a moment when the old order met something it couldn't dismiss or diminish. Targets 4 through 6 fell in rapid succession. A human silhouette at 1500 meters took a round through the head ring.
Another steel plate at 1,800 meters rang like a bell. The final target, a small bullseye at 2,000 meters, the extreme edge of the weapon's effective range, exploded in a cloud of paper and paste. By the sixth target, even the most skeptical observers had fallen silent. Maya's shooting wasn't just accurate, it was transcendent. Each shot flowed from the last like verses in a poem written in ballistics and physics.
The TAC-50, designed to disable vehicles and penetrate armor, was singing in her hands with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. As the echo of the sixth shot faded across the coastline, Maya slowly rose to her feet. The rifle remained cradled in her arms, smoke rising from its muzzle like incense in a cathedral dedicated to precision. Blackwood stood 20 feet away, his injured arm forgotten, his face reflecting the dawning realization that he'd just witnessed something extraordinary. But Maya's victory came with a weight she hadn't anticipated. As the crowd began to disperse, she caught fragments of conversations that would follow her for the rest of her career. "Did you see how she handled the Admiral? Think she'll face charges? That was either the ballsiest thing I've ever seen or career suicide." Osprey appeared at her side, his young face split by a grin that couldn't quite hide his concern. "Ma'am, holy shit, that was incredible. But what happens now?" Maya looked across the firing range where maintenance crews were already moving to collect the destroyed targets. The sun was climbing higher, promising another scorching day on the Virginia coast. Somewhere beyond the base perimeter, civilians were going about their morning routines, unaware that something significant had just shifted in a small corner of their world. "I don't know, Osprey," she said quietly, her voice carrying notes of exhaustion and exhilaration in equal measure. "I honestly don't know." What Maya did know was that she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The woman who'd fired those 6 perfect shots wasn't the same person who'd stood silently while Admiral Blackwood grabbed her rifle. Something fundamental had changed in those few minutes, something that went beyond marksmanship or naval protocol. As she walked toward the armory to secure her weapon, Maya felt the weight of eyes following her. Some watched with admiration, others with calculation, still others with the kind of uncertainty that comes when established hierarchies are suddenly called into question. But all of them watched, and Maya knew that her story, whatever it was destined to become, was just beginning. The morning sun climbed higher over the Naval Special Warfare facility, painting the coastline in shades of gold and amber. In a few hours, reports would be filed, investigations would begin. The machinery of military justice would start its slow grind. But for now, in this moment suspended between action and consequence, Maya Reynolds walked across the firing range as perhaps the most dangerous woman in the United States Navy. And somewhere in the distance, a secure communication channel crackled with news that would change everything. "Spec-War command to all units. We have a situation developing. Priority Alpha protocol is now in effect." 3 months before the confrontation that would define her career, Lieutenant Commander Maya Reynolds sat in her small off-base apartment, methodically cleaning her personal firearms while NPR played quietly in the background. The ritual had become sacred to her. Every Tuesday evening, she would strip down her Sig Sauer P226, her backup Glock 19, and when she could bring it home, her beloved TAC-50. Each piece was examined, cleaned, oiled, and reassembled with the kind of meditative precision that others might reserve for prayer. The apartment itself told the story of a life lived between 2 worlds. Military efficiency dominated the space, a perfectly made bed with hospital corners, boots aligned precisely beside the door, uniforms hanging in order of frequency of use. But scattered throughout were traces of the woman behind the warrior. Her grandfather's old naval compass displayed in a handcrafted box, a collection of Gabriel Garcia Marquez novels in Spanish and English, and a small altar with candles and photos of family members who had passed on. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister Lucia in San Diego. "Saw your picture in Navy Times. Abuela would have framed it and shown everyone at church. When are you coming home?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a discharged rifle.
Home. Maya had been asking herself the same question for 12 years, ever since she'd stepped off the bus at Officer Candidate School in Newport and discovered that the girl from San Diego was stronger than she'd ever imagined.
Her morning routine began at 04:30, regardless of whether she was on duty. Maya believed that discipline was like marksmanship. It required daily practice to maintain. She would wake without an alarm, her internal clock calibrated by years of naval service, and begin with 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, and a 5-mile run along the Virginia Beach coastline. The run was where Maya's mind was most free. As her feet found their rhythm on the packed sand, she would let her thoughts drift to the contradictions that defined her existence. She was a sniper, a job that required her to remain invisible, to strike from shadows and disappear like smoke. Yet everything about her presence on base seemed to invite attention, scrutiny, and the kind of commentary that followed women in combat roles. During one particularly challenging morning run, Maya had encountered Admiral Blackwood for the first time. He'd been jogging in the opposite direction, his pace labored and his form sloppy. As they passed, he'd called out, "Pace yourself there, sailor. You're making the brass look bad." Maya had smiled and nodded, but the encounter stuck with her. Later, she learned that Blackwood had been asking questions about her performance evaluations, her deployment record, her attitude. The word had been whispered by well-meaning chiefs who thought she should know what the brass was saying. Attitude. Maya had heard the word used to describe every woman who'd refused to shrink herself to fit into spaces designed for men. It was code, a shorthand that meant she doesn't know her place, or she asks too many questions, or simply she exists in a way that makes us uncomfortable. But Maya's attitude had been forged in fires that most of these men couldn't imagine. Growing up in San Diego's Barrio Logan neighborhood, she had learned early that the world was divided into predators and prey, and the only choice that mattered was which one you decided to be. Her father, a career Navy man, had died when she was 14, leaving behind a family struggling to maintain their footing in an increasingly expensive city. Her mother, Isabella, had worked 2 jobs to keep Maya and her siblings fed, clothed, and in school. Maya's path to the Navy had begun in her junior year of high school, when a recruiter named Commander Patricia Williams had visited her JROTC class. Williams was everything Maya wanted to become: confident, respected, deadly serious about her profession. After the presentation, Maya had approached her with a question that would change her life. "What do I have to do to become like you?" The answer had been both simple and complex. Everything. Maya would have to excel academically, physically, and mentally. She would have to prove herself not just once, but constantly, forever. She would have to accept that her victories would be questioned, her defeats magnified, and her every move scrutinized by people looking for evidence that she didn't belong. Maya had accepted those terms without hesitation. Her first deployment had been a revelation. Away from the politics and posturing of shore duty, Maya had discovered what she was truly capable of. Her first confirmed kill came during a pirate attack on a merchant vessel off the Somali coast. A hostile combatant positioned on the pilot house at 400 meters away, systematically firing an RPG at the rescue helicopter. Maya had spotted the threat, calculated wind and distance in seconds, and put a .300 Winchester Magnum round through the man's chest. The hostile fire had stopped immediately, and the helicopter had been able to extract without further casualties. That night, writing in her journal by red light, Maya had tried to capture what it felt like to save lives by taking one. "It's not like the movies," she had written. "There's no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just the weight of a decision and the knowledge that 20 sailors are going home to their families because of what I did today. I can live with that weight." But the weight had accumulated over 4 deployments. Maya's confirmed neutralization stood at 103, a number that made her one of the most effective snipers in naval history. Each number represented a human being whose story had ended in her crosshairs, and Maya carried every one of them with her.
She'd learned to compartmentalize, to separate the professional sniper from the woman who loved her family, who read poetry in Spanish, who sometimes cried during sad movies. But the lines weren't always clear, and the contradictions sometimes threatened to tear her apart.
Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the base psychologist, had become Maya's confidant during her mandatory post-deployment sessions. Martinez was one of the few people on base who seemed to understand the unique pressures Maya faced as both a woman and a highly skilled operator. "You're carrying more than just the weight of your actions," Martinez had observed during one of their sessions. "You're carrying the expectations of everyone who wants you to fail and everyone who needs you to succeed. That's not sustainable." Maya had nodded, but hadn't known how to respond. Sustainability wasn't a luxury she felt she could afford. Every day brought new challenges to her place in the Navy, new tests of her competence and character. She couldn't simply be good at her job. She had to be exceptional. She couldn't just fit in. She had to prove that women belonged in roles that had been exclusively male for centuries. The pressure had manifested in ways both large and small. Maya found herself triple-checking her gear, arriving early for every briefing, volunteering for the most dangerous assignments. She learned to navigate the delicate balance between being respected as a professional and being accepted as a member of the team. Some of her male colleagues had become genuine friends and allies. Osprey, her current spotter, had initially been skeptical of working with a female sniper, but after their first mission together, a complex anti-piracy operation in the Strait of Hormuz, where Maya had eliminated 3 threats in rapid succession, he'd become her most loyal supporter. "Ma'am," he'd said as they extracted from that mission, "I don't care if you're a woman, a Martian, or a trained dolphin. You're the best damn shot I've ever worked with, and I'd follow you into hell with a water pistol." Lieutenant Rivera had become something closer than a sister. As one of the few women in combat roles on base, Rivera understood the daily negotiations that Maya's presence required. They would meet for coffee on Sunday mornings, sharing stories and strategies for surviving in a world that seemed designed to test their resolve. "The thing they don't tell you," Rivera had said during one of their conversations, "is that we're not just fighting the enemy, we're fighting history, tradition, and the expectations of everyone who thinks we're just playing soldier until we find a husband and settle down." Maya's relationships with men had been complicated by her profession. Civilian men were often intimidated by her skills and experiences, while military men sometimes saw her as either a conquest to be claimed or a threat to be neutralized. She'd had a few relationships over the years, but none had survived the reality of who she was and what she did for a living. Her family remained her anchor, even from a distance. Maya called her mother every Sunday, listening to updates about her siblings' lives, her nephews' baseball games, and the neighborhood gossip that seemed simultaneously trivial and essential. Her mother had never fully understood Maya's choice to join the Navy, but she'd learned to take pride in her daughter's achievements. "Mija," her mother had said during their last conversation, "I saw on the news that women can now serve in all combat roles. I thought they already could because of you." The comment had stayed with Maya for days. In her mother's mind, Maya had always been capable of anything she set out to do. The idea that there might be barriers or limitations based on her gender simply didn't compute. It was a perspective both beautiful and heartbreaking, a reminder of how different the world looked from inside Maya's daily reality. Maya's daily life on base was a carefully choreographed performance. She arrived at the armory each morning at 06:30, checked her equipment with ritualistic precision, and prepared for whatever training or operations the day might bring. She'd learned to read the moods and politics of her unit, to know when to speak up and when to remain silent, to navigate the complex social dynamics that could make or break a military career.
The other snipers in her unit had gradually accepted her presence, though some remained skeptical. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, a veteran of 6 deployments, had initially refused to work with Maya, but after she'd saved his team during a training exercise gone wrong, spotting a safety violation that everyone else had missed, Thompson had become one of her most vocal supporters. Reynolds doesn't shoot like a woman or a man. She shoots like a fucking sniper. And if you got a problem with that, you can take it up with the targets she puts holes in.
But not everyone had come around. There were still whispers, still comments designed to undermine her confidence or question her competence. Maya had learned to let most of them roll off her back, but some cut deeper than others. The suggestion that she'd earned her position through sexual favors rather than merit. The implication that her emotions would compromise her judgment in combat. The assumption that she was just marking time until she found a husband and started a family. Each comment was a test, and Maya had passed them all through sheer force of will and exceptional performance. But the cumulative weight was exhausting. She sometimes wondered what it would be like to simply be good at her job without the constant need to prove that she deserved to have it. Maya's apartment bore witness to these internal struggles. Late at night, after particularly difficult days, she would sit at her small desk and write in a journal that she kept locked in a fireproof safe. The entries were a mixture of professional observations, personal reflections, and the kind of raw honesty that she couldn't share with anyone else. Had another conversation with the chaplain today, read one entry from 6 weeks before the confrontation with Blackwood. He asked if I ever felt conflicted about killing. I wanted to tell him that the conflict isn't in the killing, it's in everything else. It's in having to justify my existence every single day. It's in being held to standards that no one else has to meet. It's in watching lesser men advance while I fight for every scrap of recognition. The entry continued. But I can't say that to him or anyone else because it would sound like complaining, and complainers don't last long in this business. So I smiled and told him that I pray for the souls of every person I've killed, which is true. What I didn't tell him is that I also pray for the strength to keep doing this job in a world that sometimes feels like it's trying to break me. Maya's faith had been another source of internal conflict. Raised Catholic, she struggled to reconcile her role as a sniper with the commandment against killing. Father Rodriguez, a Navy chaplain who'd served multiple deployments, had helped her work through the theological implications of her profession. God doesn't call us to be pacifists in the face of evil, he told her during one of their discussions. Sometimes the most merciful thing we can do is to stop those who would harm the innocent. Your skills are a gift, Maya. How you use them determines whether that gift serves God or serves your own pride. The conversation had provided some measure of peace, but the questions remained. Maya found herself examining her motivations before every mission, ensuring that she was acting from a sense of duty rather than personal anger or ambition. It was a level of self-reflection that most of her colleagues never bothered to board, but Maya knew that her actions would be scrutinized more carefully than theirs. Training had become her refuge, the one place where politics and personalities fell away, leaving only the pure relationship between shooter, rifle, and target. Maya would spend hours on the range, pushing the limits of distance and precision, exploring the outer boundaries of what was possible with her equipment and skills. Her personal best shot had been made during a training exercise at Dam Neck. A cold-bore shot at 2,200 meters, hitting a target the size of a dinner plate in 18-knot crosswinds. The shot had required calculations involving bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric pressure, temperature, and humidity, variables that Maya processed instinctively after years of experience. But it wasn't the distance that made the shot special. It was the circumstances. Maya had been having doubts about her place in the Navy, questioning whether the constant battles for respect and recognition were worth the personal cost. The shot had reminded her why she'd chosen this profession.
the pure satisfaction of perfect execution, the knowledge that her skills could mean the difference between her teammates coming home alive or in body bags. As the date of the confrontation with Admiral Blackwood approached, Maya had been sensing a shift in the atmosphere on base. There were more whispers, more pointed questions about her attitude and her future plans. Blackwood himself had been making subtle inquiries about her background, her relationships, and her psychological evaluations. Maya had tried to prepare for whatever was coming, but she hadn't anticipated the fury she would feel when Blackwood's hands closed around her rifle.
The TAC-50 wasn't just a weapon to her. It was an extension of her professional identity, a tool that had saved countless lives and defined her place in the world. Watching Blackwood handle it with casual disrespect had triggered something primal and fierce. The morning of the confrontation, Maya had awakened with an unusual sense of clarity. Her dreams had been filled with images of her grandmother, who had left Mexico during political unrest and rebuilt her life through sheer determination. Nieta, her grandmother had always said, there comes a time when you must choose between being comfortable and being true to yourself. Choose truth, even when it costs you everything. Maya had chosen truth, and now she was about to discover what it would cost her. The 24 hours following Maya's confrontation with Admiral Blackwood unfolded like a controlled detonation, each event triggering the next in a chain reaction that would reshape the power dynamics of naval special warfare. Maya's first indication that her actions had created a seismic shift came at 05:30 the morning after the shooting demonstration, when she arrived at the armory to find her access card deactivated. Master Chief Petty Officer Williams, the armorer, met her at the door with an expression that mixed sympathy with professional obligation. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," Williams said, his voice carefully neutral, "I've been instructed to inform you that your weapons privileges have been temporarily suspended pending an investigation into yesterday's incident." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Being separated from her weapons wasn't just a professional setback, it was an attack on her identity. "What kind of investigation?" Master Chief Williams handed her an official envelope bearing the seal of the base commander. "You're to report to Captain Harrison's office at 0800. "I'm sorry, Maya. This is coming from way above my pay grade." As Maya walked back to her quarters, she noticed the stares and conversations that stopped abruptly as she passed. Word of her confrontation with Blackwood had spread through the base like wildfire, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about what she'd done and what it meant. In her apartment, Maya opened Captain Harrison's letter with steady hands. The language was formal, but the message was clear. She was being investigated for assault on a superior officer, conduct unbecoming, and insubordination. The potential penalties included court-martial, imprisonment, and dishonorable discharge. Maya's phone rang as she finished reading the charges. Osprey's voice was tight with concern. "Ma'am, I've been trying to reach you. They're saying all kinds of crazy shit about yesterday. Half the base thinks you're a hero, and the other half thinks you've lost your mind." "What are you hearing, Osprey?" "That Admiral Blackwood is claiming you attacked him without provocation, that you're having some kind of psychological breakdown, that you're a security risk." Osprey paused. "But ma'am, I was there. I saw what happened. That old bastard grabbed your rifle like he owned it, and you defended yourself. Anyone with eyes could see that." After hanging up with Osprey, Maya made a series of phone calls that would prove crucial in the days to come. The first was to her mother, who listened in silence as Maya explained the situation in carefully chosen words. "Mija," her mother said when Maya finished, "you did what you had to do. Your grandmother would be proud, but now you have to be smart. This isn't about right and wrong anymore. It's about power." Maya's second call was to Lieutenant Rivera, who had already heard rumors about the investigation. "Maya, you need a lawyer," Rivera said without preamble. "A good one, the kind who understands military politics and isn't afraid to fight dirty." The name Rivera gave her was Commander Jennifer Walsh, a former Navy JAG officer who had transitioned to civilian practice after winning several high-profile military justice cases. Walsh had made her reputation defending service members who found themselves caught between doing the right thing and following orders. Maya's meeting with Captain Harrison at 0800 was a masterclass in naval diplomacy. Harrison, a career officer with combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan,
had navigated the complex politics of military leadership for 20 years. He understood that Maya's case had the potential to explode into a public relations nightmare. "For the record, Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," Harrison began, his office Spartan, except for photos of sailors he'd served with and commanded, "I want you to know that I've reviewed your service record. Your performance has been exemplary. Your conduct has been above reproach, which makes yesterday's incident all the more concerning." Maya remained at attention, her eyes fixed on a point above Harrison's head. "Sir, I respectfully request the opportunity to give my account of yesterday's events." Harrison nodded. "I'm listening." Maya's account was precise and unemotional. She described Blackwood's behavior, his inappropriate handling of her weapon, and her response. She emphasized that she had used minimal force to disengage Blackwood's grip and had demonstrated her marksmanship capabilities as requested. Harrison listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. When Maya finished, he remained silent for a long moment. "Lieutenant Commander, I'm going to be straight with you. This incident has attracted attention at the highest levels. Admiral Blackwood has friends in Washington, and he's pushing for your immediate dismissal from the service." Maya felt her heart sink, but she kept her face impassive. "However," Harrison continued, "I am not without resources myself. I've requested a formal Article 32 investigation. I want this handled by the book, with all evidence properly considered. Until then, you are confined to administrative duties. No field operations, no range time, no contact with Blackwood or his staff." Maya left Harrison's office with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She hadn't been immediately discharged, which was something, but the battle ahead would be fought not just on the basis of facts, but on naval politics, public perception, and the complex dynamics of gender in a traditionally male institution. The next few weeks were a surreal experience for Maya. Stripped of her operational duties, she found herself assigned to the base administration office, processing paperwork and coordinating schedules. The isolation was perhaps the cruelest aspect of her situation. Many of her colleagues avoided her, unwilling to be associated with a case that had become so controversial. Others offered support, but did so quietly, afraid of being caught up in the investigation. Osprey was one of the few who remained openly loyal to Maya. He visited her daily, bringing news from the unit and updates on the investigation. "Ma'am, you need to know that most of the guys are on your side," he told her during one visit. "They've seen you in action. They know you're the real deal. It's just that nobody wants to stick their neck out while this thing is still pending." Maya appreciated Osprey's loyalty, but she also understood the position her colleagues were in. Military careers were fragile things, and being associated with a controversial case could have lasting consequences. She couldn't blame them for protecting themselves. The situation took an unexpected turn when Lieutenant Commander James Chen, a young intelligence officer who had been present during the confrontation, requested a meeting with the investigating officer, Commander Torres. Admiral Blackwood said that women like Lieutenant Commander Reynolds needed to be put in their place, Chen testified. He said that allowing women in combat roles was weakening the Navy, and that he intended to make an example of her. Chen's testimony sent shockwaves through the base command structure. What had initially appeared to be an isolated incident was now revealed as part of a broader pattern of discrimination and harassment. The Navy found itself facing not just a court-martial, but a potential scandal that could damage its reputation and recruitment efforts. Media attention began to focus on Maya's case when Commander Walsh strategically leaked details of Blackwood's behavior to reporters who covered military affairs. The story that emerged resonated far beyond military circles. A highly skilled female sniper facing retaliation from a superior officer who couldn't accept women in combat roles. Maya found herself at the center of a national conversation about women in the military, sexual harassment, and the changing nature of combat in the 21st century. Reporters requested interviews, which Maya declined on advice of counsel, but her silence only seemed to intensify public interest in her story.
Maya fired 6 shots in conditions similar to those on the day of the incident. All 6 shots were perfect hits, with the final one at 2,000 meters striking less than a centimeter from the absolute center of the target despite a sudden gust of wind. "Ladies and gentlemen," Walsh said as they returned to the courtroom, "you have just witnessed the performance of one of the most skilled snipers in naval history. Does this look like the behavior of an unstable individual who poses a threat to military discipline?" The hearing concluded with character witnesses testifying on Maya's behalf. Her former commanding officers praised her professionalism and combat effectiveness. Fellow snipers spoke about her skills and dedication. Even some who had initially been skeptical of women in combat roles acknowledged that Maya had earned their respect through her actions in the field. The most powerful testimony came from Captain Michael Kim, who had served as Maya's team leader during her second deployment to the Horn of Africa. Kim, a decorated SEAL with 25 years of service, spoke with the authority of someone who had seen combat in multiple conflicts. "I've served with thousands of sailors over 3 decades," Kim testified. "I've seen the best and the worst of what this Navy has to offer. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds is simply one of the finest officers I've ever known. Her gender is irrelevant. Her skills are exceptional. Her character is unquestionable. If we're going to prosecute her for defending her professional dignity, then we've lost sight of what it means to be a sailor." As the hearing concluded, Maya felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. The evidence seemed to support her position, but she had learned not to underestimate the power of institutional bias and the military's resistance to change. Commander Foster's recommendation would not be released for several days, leaving Maya in continued limbo. But the hearing had accomplished something important. It had created a public record of Blackwood's behavior and Maya's response, establishing the foundation for whatever legal battles lay ahead. The aftermath of the hearing saw increased media attention and political pressure. Congresswoman Martinez announced that her hearings would proceed regardless of the outcome of Maya's case, and other female service members began coming forward with their own stories of discrimination and harassment. Maya realized that her case had become larger than her individual circumstances. She was now a symbol in a broader struggle about the role of women in combat and the military's willingness to adapt to changing social realities. The weight of that symbolism was both empowering and terrifying. Late at night in her apartment, Maya would sit with her grandmother's old rosary and pray for wisdom, strength, and the courage to see her fight through to the end. She had crossed the Rubicon that morning on the firing range, and there was no going back. All she could do now was move forward with dignity and determination, trusting that truth would ultimately prevail over prejudice and politics. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just Maya's individual courage, but the Navy's commitment to the principles of honor, courage, and commitment that it claimed to embody. The breakthrough in Maya's case came from an unexpected source, a young petty officer 3rd class named Tommy Reyes, who had been operating the range's digital recording system on the day of the confrontation with Admiral Blackwood. Reyes had been too intimidated to come forward initially, but as the investigation intensified and media attention grew, his conscience finally overcame his fear. Reyes's revelation came during a late-night phone call to Commander Walsh's office 3 weeks after the Article 32 hearing, his voice shaking with nervousness. He explained that he had high-definition audio and video footage of the entire incident, footage that had not been included in the initial evidence package because he had been ordered to delete it by a senior NCO acting on Blackwood's instructions. "Ma'am," Reyes whispered into the phone, "I couldn't bring myself to delete it. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds saved my team during that extraction in Yemen. I've seen her in action, and I know she's not the person they're trying to make her out to be. The footage shows everything. What the Admiral said, how he grabbed her rifle, everything." Walsh immediately drove to the base to meet with Reyes, accompanied by a civilian forensics expert who could authenticate the digital evidence. What they discovered was even more damaging to Blackwood's case than they had hoped.
The high-definition audio had captured not just the public confrontation, but Blackwood's comments immediately before grabbing the rifle. In crystal-clear audio, Blackwood could be heard saying to another officer, "Time to put this bitch in her place." These women think they can play sailor, but they fall apart when a real man challenges them. The video showed Blackwood's body language and facial expression as he grabbed Maya's rifle, not the concerned superior officer providing guidance that he had described in his testimony, but a man acting with deliberate aggression and disrespect. The footage also captured Maya's restrained and professional response, contradicting Blackwood's portrayal of her as unstable and violent. Commander Walsh knew that this evidence would not only exonerate Maya, but would likely end Blackwood's career. However, she also understood that powerful people would try to suppress or discredit the footage. She immediately made multiple copies and secured them with different parties, including sending one to Congresswoman Martinez's office. The revelation of the suppressed evidence triggered a new phase of the investigation. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service, or NCIS, launched a probe into who had ordered the deletion of the footage and why it had been concealed from Maya's defense team. The investigation quickly expanded to include Blackwood's entire command structure. Captain Harrison found himself in an impossible position. As Maya's immediate commanding officer, he had been trying to balance loyalty to the chain of command with growing evidence that Blackwood had acted improperly. The discovery of the suppressed evidence forced him to choose sides in a conflict that was tearing apart his command. Harrison's decision came during a private meeting with Maya in his office 2 days after Reyes's evidence surfaced. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of command decisions, "I owe you an apology. I trusted the system to work fairly, but the system was being manipulated by people who should have known better." Maya remained at attention, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented admission from her commanding officer. Harrison continued, "I've reviewed the evidence that Petty Officer Reyes preserved. What Admiral Blackwood did was wrong, and what happened afterward was worse. You deserve better from your leadership, and I intend to make sure you get it." The captain's support proved crucial as the investigation expanded. Harrison used his authority to protect Maya from retaliation while ensuring that other potential witnesses felt safe to come forward. His actions sent a signal throughout the base that the leadership was committed to finding the truth regardless of the political consequences. The impact of Harrison's support became clear when Lieutenant Rivera requested a meeting with Maya's legal team. Rivera had been struggling with her conscience since the incident, knowing that she possessed information that could help Maya's case, but afraid of the career consequences of speaking out. "I've been documenting Admiral Blackwood's behavior for months," Rivera told Walsh and Torres during a confidential interview. "He's made inappropriate comments about every female service member in his command. He's created a hostile work environment and retaliated against anyone who challenged him." Rivera produced a detailed log of Blackwood's comments and actions, including dates, times, and witnesses. The documentation painted a picture of systematic discrimination and harassment that went far beyond Maya's own case. The most damning entry in Rivera's log was dated just 2 weeks before the firing range incident. Blackwood had attended a briefing about integrating women into previously all-male combat roles and had been overheard saying, "Over my dead body will some feminist agenda turn my operators into social justice warriors. I'll drive them out before I let them contaminate my command." As more evidence emerged, the political dimensions of Maya's case intensified. Congresswoman Martinez's promised hearings were now scheduled for the following month, and Martinez had made it clear that she intended to use Maya's case as a catalyst for broader reforms in military culture. The Navy's leadership faced a crisis of credibility. If they proceeded with charges against Maya in the face of mounting evidence of Blackwood's misconduct, they would appear to be prioritizing the protection of senior officers over justice for their personnel. If they dropped the charges, they would be admitting that the initial investigation had been flawed or biased. Vice Admiral Patricia Williams, the Navy's highest-ranking female officer, was brought in to review Maya's case and recommend a path forward.
Williams had broken barriers throughout her career and understood the unique challenges facing women in combat roles. Her involvement signaled that the Navy was taking the matter seriously at the highest levels. Williams' review was thorough and uncompromising. She interviewed Maya personally, spending 3 hours going over every aspect of her service record and the events leading up to the confrontation with Blackwood. At the end of the interview, Williams made a statement that would become legendary in Navy circles. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," Williams said, "you are exactly the kind of sailor this Navy needs more of. Skilled, professional, and willing to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you personally. The Navy owes you an apology, and I intend to make sure you get it." The formal apology came in the form of a base-wide formation called by Captain Harrison. Standing before 2,000 sailors in their dress blue uniforms, Harrison read a statement that had been carefully crafted to acknowledge the injustice Maya had faced while preserving the dignity of the institution. "The United States Navy prides itself on the principles of honor, courage, and commitment," Harrison began. "In the case of Lieutenant Commander Maya Reynolds, we failed to live up to those principles. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds was subjected to inappropriate conduct by a senior officer and then faced retaliation for defending her professional dignity. This is not who we are, and this is not who we aspired to be." The statement continued with a formal apology to Maya and a commitment to reforms that would prevent similar incidents in the future. As Harrison concluded his remarks, something unprecedented happened. The assembled sailors began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation that lasted for several minutes. Maya stood at attention throughout the ceremony, her face a mask of professional composure, but those who knew her could see the emotion in her eyes, relief, vindication, and a deep satisfaction that the truth had finally been acknowledged. The ceremony was followed by a series of one-on-one meetings between Maya and senior officers who had initially been skeptical of her account. One by one, they offered personal apologies and assurances that they would support her continued service. Master Chief Thompson, who had initially questioned Maya's version of events, was among those who sought her out. "Reynolds," he said, his gruff voice softened by genuine remorse, "I should have listened better. I should have known that someone with your record wouldn't make this up. I'm sorry I doubted you." The acknowledgement from Thompson and others like him was perhaps more meaningful to Maya than the formal ceremonies. These were the sailors she served alongside daily, the men and women whose respect mattered more than any official recognition. But the most powerful moment of recognition came from an unexpected source: Admiral Blackwood himself. Facing the end of his career and possible criminal charges, Blackwood requested a private meeting with Maya through her legal team. The meeting took place in a conference room at the base legal offices, with both Maya's lawyers and Blackwood's counsel present. Blackwood, looking older and more frail than Maya remembered, struggled to find the words to begin. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you an apology that I can never adequately express. My actions that day were inexcusable, and my behavior afterward was even worse. You are a better sailor than I ever was, and I let my prejudices blind me to that truth." Blackwood's apology was halting and clearly painful for him to deliver. He spoke about his fear of change, his inability to adapt to the evolving military, and his recognition that his attitudes belonged to a different era. It was a stunning admission from a man who had built his career on projecting strength and authority. Maya listened without interruption, her face impassive. When Blackwood finished, she stood slowly and looked directly into his eyes. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I accept your apology. But you need to understand that this was never about you and me personally. This was about the principle that all sailors deserve to be judged by their performance, not their gender. I hope that other senior leaders will learn from your mistakes." The ceremony concluded without handshakes or pleasantries, but with a sense that a chapter had been closed. Blackwood would retire quietly within the month, his career ending not with the honors typically accorded to flag officers, but with the understanding that his legacy would be defined by this confrontation. The broader recognition of Maya's case came through the media coverage that had been building since the initial incident. The story of a decorated female sniper standing up to discrimination had captured the public imagination, and Maya found herself reluctantly thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of women's progress in the military. The coverage wasn't uniformly positive. Conservative commentators criticized Maya for breaking the chain of command and suggested that women in combat roles were inherently disruptive to military discipline. But the majority of coverage portrayed her as a hero, a skilled professional who had been mistreated by an obsolete system. Maya's family watched the coverage with a mixture of pride and concern. Her mother called after seeing Maya featured on the evening news, her voice filled with emotion. "Mija, the whole neighborhood is talking about you. Mrs. Rodriguez says you're a role model for her daughters, but I worry about what this attention means for your safety and your future." Maya understood her mother's concerns. Fame was a double-edged sword in the military, where standing out could be as dangerous as falling behind. But she also recognized that her case had opened doors for other women who might face similar challenges in the future. The congressional hearings, chaired by Congresswoman Martinez, provided the most significant platform for Maya to tell her story. Testifying before the House Armed Services Committee, Maya spoke with the same precision and professionalism she brought to her military duties. "Members of Congress," Maya said in her opening statement, "I didn't choose to become a symbol or a cause. I chose to become a sailor. But if my experience can help other women serve their country without facing the discrimination that I faced, then perhaps it all happened for a reason." Maya's testimony was followed by that of other female service members who had experienced similar discrimination. Together, their stories painted a picture of a military culture that was struggling to evolve, caught between tradition and the demands of modern warfare. The hearings resulted in a series of legislative proposals aimed at strengthening protections for women in the military. These included enhanced reporting mechanisms for harassment, greater transparency in promotion decisions, and independent oversight of discrimination complaints. For Maya personally, the aftermath of the hearings brought both vindication and new challenges. She was formally reinstated to full operational status, with all accusations against her expunged from her record. She was promoted to commander and given command of her own Special Warfare Tactical Unit, a position that would have been unthinkable for a woman just a few years earlier. But the real test came when she returned to operational status. Would her team accept her leadership? Would the skills that had made her an exceptional sniper translate to effective command? Would she be forever defined by her confrontation with Blackwood, or would she be able to move beyond it? Maya's first mission as commander came 6 months after the hearings. Her team was tasked with securing the release of hostages held by pirates off the Somali coast. The operation was complex, requiring precise coordination between multiple assets and perfect timing. As they prepared for deployment, Maya was acutely aware of the eyes upon her. Every decision she made would be scrutinized, every order questioned. The pressure was immense, but she had faced pressure before. In the team's final briefing before departure, Maya looked at the faces of the men and women under her command. Some she knew well from previous operations. Others were new, assigned to her unit based on their specialized skills. "We have one mission," she told them, her voice clear and confident, "to bring those hostages home safely. Everything else, politics, media, personalities, all of that stays on shore. Out there, we're just sailors doing our job." The operation was a textbook success. Maya's team extracted the hostages with no casualties on either side, demonstrating the kind of precision and discipline that had once been considered exclusive to all male units. The after-action reports praised Maya's leadership, her tactical decision-making, and her ability to inspire confidence in her team. But for Maya, the real measure of success came in a quiet moment after their return to base.
Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a veteran of 15 years and initially one of the most skeptical about serving under a female commander, approached her as she was completing her mission log.
"Commander," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "I've served under a dozen different officers, some good, some not so good, but I've never felt as confident going into an operation as I did today. You've earned every bit of that uniform." The comment meant more to Maya than all the official recognition, all the media coverage, all the political support. It was acknowledgement from a fellow professional who judged her solely on her performance, exactly what she had been fighting for all along. In the months that followed, Maya's unit became one of the most requested for high-priority missions. Their success rate was exceptional, and their ability to adapt to changing conditions became legendary within special warfare circles. More importantly, Maya's success opened doors for other women in similar roles. The number of female applicants to elite combat units increased dramatically, and the success of Maya's team provided a powerful counterargument to those who claimed that women couldn't perform effectively in combat. Vice Admiral Williams, who had been a key ally during Maya's darkest days, summarized the impact during a leadership conference at Annapolis. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds didn't just win a personal victory, Williams told the assembled officers. She changed the conversation about what's possible in naval warfare. She showed us that the qualities that make an effective warrior, courage, discipline, judgment, adaptability, aren't gendered. They're human. Maya's return to active field operations marked a turning point, not just for her career, but for the culture of naval special warfare itself. The specialized command structure she implemented with her team quickly became a case study in effective leadership. Rather than trying to erase her gender or adopt traditionally masculine approaches to command, Maya drew strength from her unique perspective and experiences. During one particularly challenging mission in the Philippines, targeting a terrorist cell that had been financing attacks across Southeast Asia, Maya's unconventional approach proved decisive. The operation required infiltrating a compound in a densely populated urban area, a scenario where traditional brute force tactics carried unacceptable risks of civilian casualties. The conventional play would be a night raid, Maya explained to her team during planning. But they're expecting that. We need to think differently. Drawing on her background in precision operations, Maya proposed a strategy that relied on patience, cultural awareness, and surgical precision rather than overwhelming force. She deployed her female operators as part of an undercover surveillance team, capitalizing on the fact that local extremists consistently underestimated women's capabilities. Over 3 days, this team mapped the compound's routines and security measures while appearing to be nothing more than local civilians. When the moment came to strike, Maya's team executed with such precision that they secured both the high-value target and critical intelligence while firing less than a dozen rounds. Admiral James Chen, commander of the 7th Fleet, reviewed the operation report with amazement. "Reynolds has fundamentally changed how we think about special operations," he told his staff. "She's proved that the most effective approach isn't always the most aggressive one." The success of the Philippines operation catapulted Maya's reputation beyond the specialized world of special warfare. Military strategists began studying her methodologies, and requests for her to train other units poured in from across the armed forces. What had begun as a personal struggle against discrimination was evolving into a movement that was reshaping military doctrine. But with higher profile came greater scrutiny. Conservative elements within the military establishment, uncomfortable with the changes Maya represented, searched for evidence that her successes were anomalies or that her approach compromised national security. Their criticisms grew particularly strident after a profile of Maya appeared in The Atlantic, highlighting her as the face of the military's evolution. "They're looking for any mistake, any stumble," Lieutenant Rivera warned during one of their Sunday coffee meetings. "The old guard hasn't given up. They've just changed tactics." Maya nodded,
understanding the precarious nature of her position. Then we don't give them anything to work with. We execute perfectly, every time.
The asset had critical intelligence about an imminent attack on U.S. soil, but was trapped in a facility protected by over 100 armed guards. "This is a suicide mission," Osprey says bluntly during the initial briefing. "Conventional approaches would require a company-size element, not a 12-person team." Maya studied the satellite imagery, her mind calculating angles, distances, and probabilities. "Then we don't use conventional approaches," she replied. "We use what they're not expecting." Her plan was audacious. Instead of a direct assault, Maya proposed a diversionary operation that would draw security forces away from the compound, combined with a precision infiltration by a small team led by herself. The strategy required perfect timing, flawless execution, and absolute trust among team members. Captain Harrison, now elevated to Rear Admiral, expressed concern when Maya presented the plan. "Commander, this is exceptionally high risk. Are you certain this is the best approach?" "Sir, with respect, high risk doesn't mean high casualty," Maya responded. "The conventional approach guarantees casualties on both sides. My approach gives us the best chance of achieving the objective with minimal loss of life." After careful consideration, Harrison approved the operation, but with a sobering warning. "If this goes sideways, Reynolds, the critics will use it to undermine everything you've built." The night of the operation brought monsoon conditions, with driving rain and winds that would have grounded most aviation assets. But Maya had anticipated this challenge, incorporating the weather into her planning as a tactical advantage rather than an obstacle. As her team prepared for insertion, Maya gathered them for a final briefing. Looking at their faces, men and women from diverse backgrounds, united by their commitment to the mission, she felt a surge of pride. "Tonight isn't about proving anything to anyone," she told them, her voice steady despite the howling wind. "It's about bringing our asset home and preventing an attack on American soil. Trust your training, trust each other, and remember that precision wins over power every time." The operation unfolded with the complexity of a symphony. The diversionary element, led by Osprey, created a security incident 3 kilometers from the main compound, drawing away nearly 60% of the security forces, while operatives commandeered the security personnel. Maya's infiltration team used the storm's cover to approach the compound from an unexpected angle. Using her sniper skills, Maya neutralized the perimeter guards with non-lethal shots, precise impacts that incapacitated without killing, reducing the chance of raised alarms. The team breached the compound's defenses using a combination of technical expertise and physical skill that reflected hundreds of hours of specialized training. 47 minutes after insertion, Maya's team had secured the asset and was moving toward extraction. The mission appeared to be proceeding perfectly, until a hidden security protocol triggered, sealing the compound's exit routes and trapping the team inside. "Command, we have a situation," Maya reported over the secure channel, her voice calm despite the dire circumstances. "Primary and secondary extraction routes compromised, requesting immediate alternatives." The response from tactical operations was grim. "Commander Reynolds, nearest alternative extraction is 20 minutes out. Satellite shows hostile reinforcements inbound, ETA 12 minutes. Maya processed this information with the same analytical precision she applied to complex shots. The tactical equation was simple but brutal. Her team would be overwhelmed before extraction arrived. Standard doctrine would call for establishing a defensive position and preparing for a last stand. But Maya had never been bound by standard doctrine. "Team, new plan," she announced. "We're not waiting for extraction. We're creating our own." Using the compound's architectural plans memorized during mission prep, Maya identified a structural weakness in the east wing, a section that bordered a steep ravine leading to the coastline. If they could breach that section and navigate the ravine, they could reach a position where maritime extraction became viable. "That's a 30-meter drop," her demolition specialist pointed out. "Even if we breach the wall, how do we survive the descent?" Maya smiled, the expression invisible in the darkness. "We use what they gave us against them."
The team quickly repurposed the compound's own security equipment, cables, emergency harnesses, and maintenance gear, into improvised descent systems.
Maya divided the team into elements, ensuring the asset remained protected while they prepared the breach. When the explosive charges detonated, creating an exit where none had existed before, Maya was the first to secure the descent lines. She personally checked each team member's equipment before sending them down the ravine face, remaining in the compound until everyone else had descended. As hostile forces breached the inner compound, Maya was the last to begin her descent, providing covering fire that kept the enemy pinned down just long enough for her team to reach the bottom. The harrowing descent through driving rain and howling winds required every bit of physical conditioning and mental fortitude she possessed. The team reached the coastal extraction point with less than 2 minutes to spare before the pursuit forces would have intercepted them. As the maritime craft powered away from the shoreline, Maya conducted a final head count. All members present, the assets secure, no casualties. The mission, deemed impossible by conventional standards, had been executed with textbook precision. But more importantly, it had been achieved through innovation, adaptability, and a leadership style that drew strength from diversity rather than conformity. When the team returned to base, the debriefing session was attended by an unprecedented array of senior officers, including Vice Admiral Williams. The room fell silent as Maya methodically walked through each phase of the operation, explaining decision points and adaptations with the clarity that had become her trademark. When she finished, Williams stood. "Commander Reynolds, in 30 years of naval service, I have never witnessed an operation executed with such precision under such adverse conditions. Your actions tonight represent the highest traditions of naval special warfare." The commendation was followed by promotion. Maya would be elevated to captain, one of the youngest and first women to achieve that rank in special warfare. But more significant than the promotion was the announcement that followed. Captain Reynolds will be establishing and leading a new special warfare training group, Williams announced. Her mission will be to integrate the methodologies and leadership approaches she has pioneered into our broader training curriculum. This wasn't just recognition, it was institutionalization. Maya's approaches would now become part of the Navy's DNA, taught to generations of operators who would never know a time when women weren't integral to combat operations. The training command gave Maya a platform to codify the principles that had guided her success. She developed programs that emphasized adaptive thinking, precision over power, and the strategic advantage of diverse perspectives. Under her leadership, the dropout rate for female candidates decreased by 60%, while overall operational readiness scores improved across the board. 3 years into her command, Maya received an invitation that symbolized how far both she and the Navy had come. The Naval Academy was establishing a new chair in asymmetric warfare, and they wanted Maya to be its first occupant. The position would allow her to shape not just current operators, but future generations of naval leaders. The decision wasn't easy. Maya loved the operational tempo of field command, the concrete reality of missions with clear objectives. Academia represented a different kind of challenge, one where success couldn't be measured in targets neutralized or objectives secured. She sought counsel from the person whose wisdom had guided her since childhood, her mother. During a rare visit home to San Diego, Maya walked with Isabella along the beaches where she had played as a child. "Mija," her mother said after listening to Maya's concerns, "you've already proven everything you needed to prove as a warrior. Perhaps now it's time to be a teacher." Maya considered her mother's words, watching the waves roll in from the Pacific, the same ocean she had crossed on countless missions. The Navy had changed during her years of service, becoming more inclusive, more adaptive, more effective. But change was fragile unless it became tradition. "You're right, Mama. The fight isn't just about what I can do. It's about making sure others have the chance to do even more." The Academy appointment came with another honor. Maya was asked to deliver the commencement address to that year's graduating class. Standing before thousands of midshipmen in their dress whites, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this podium. Maya's journey had come full circle. From a young woman determined to find her place in an institution that questioned her presence, she had become the embodiment of that institution's highest values. She had proven that the most powerful weapon in any arsenal wasn't a rifle or a warship or even a nuclear deterrent. It was the courage to stand for principle, even when standing alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Academy waters in shades of gold and crimson, Maya completed her run at the memorial that had been erected to honor fallen graduates. Among the names was Lieutenant Marcus Chen, her first spotter, whose sacrifice had set her on the path that led to this moment. Maya placed her hand on his name, feeling the connection to all who had served before her and all who would serve after. In that touch was a promise that their sacrifice would never be forgotten, and that the Navy they had died to protect would continue to evolve, to improve, to become worthy of their memory. "The mission continues, Chen," she whispered, "and we're just getting started." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.